thank you guys so much for everyone being here. We're going to get started, and the first thing that I'm going to do, if I find my little script, is I'm going to introduce our guest here today. So, this is Grace Reinhardt McCrae. No, I put my hands on the wrong side, right over here. She is a medievalist and holds an MSc in World Heritage Management and Conservation. She is currently a PhD candidate in Archaeology and World Heritage. Her research focus is the use of myth and legend in heritage tourism and archaeology using the Languedoc region, we're going to go with that, of Southwest France as a case study. You can find her on Instagram at The Time Traveling Archaeologist or on Twitter, Grace R. McCrae, with the name that you see on the screen here. So welcome, Grace. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let me get lecture all pulled up.
I'm gonna hide the chat, so I'll let anyone has questions.
So yes,
Melissa.
I will repeat that as well. Anybody who wants to ask a question, if you don't want it to get lost in the chat, use the channel point at the bottom for lecture questions. It's only one Ankh. Or you could highlight it as well. But if you do the lecture questions, it will come up into the queue and I will see it. Grace is okay with answering questions throughout, but if there's too many, I'll pick and choose a couple of them. And then at the end, we'll do a much longer Q&A and such. So let me slideshow. Alright, let's go over here. Yes, you can still see the bottom bar of my computer, but I don't know how to get that off, so that's fine. All right, just checking the chat. All right, and please let us know any audio problems. I do have chill music coming up in the back, but if that is too loud, let me know if you hear that over Grace. One question first is, why did you choose the region that you're studying? Because that is also very curious.
Yeah, so I chose that region in particular because my parents actually lived there, and I spent the entire pandemic with them.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. And so it was accessible, it was easy, it was something that I was witnessing in real time. I'm just kind of realizing, oh no, things are happening on my screen. What's happening?
Oh no.
Sorry.
Oh, you know what? You know what I forgot to do? I forgot that I can share my screen with you, so you can actually see the slides. I forgot to do
that would be very helpful.
Yeah. I forgot to do that. So keep talking while I do that.
Okay. I've completely forgotten where I was. But I kind of saw what was happening in the region, read a lot of the books and literature about it, and just kind of realized that it was an issue that people weren't really talking about all that much. And so I actually did my master's thesis on one location that I talk about here. And I called it Heritage as a Hoax, because there is a particular place in this region where the entire heritage has kind of been co-opted into conspiracy theory and hoax, as opposed to the actual history that happened. And it seemed incredibly unfair to everybody who lives and lived in the region, whose history is being completely stamped out by this myth. So that's where I'm at.
The only other thing is your name French and Scottish? Is the question? Is Iron Chef's question?
McCrae is Scottish. Reinhardt is somewhere in somewhere in the middle of Europe, Austria, Germany.
There we go. Yeah, definitely. Reinhardt would be a different little Germanic, but
a little bit Germanic. So,
all right.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and hop on in then.
Oh, I went to the wrong slide. Here we go. Okay. All right. Let me know as long as you can see it.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay. So yes, as Melissa has said, my name's Grace. I'm in the depths of a PhD at the moment, and I feel like I should give a disclaimer that it is about 1 a.m. my time. So if things stop making sense,
And
Tell me to go get
we're
another
not gonna
cup of
leave
coffee.
Grace for too long because she is braving the time difference to come in at this time.
We'll be fine. I've got coffee. We're good. Um, so yes, my PhD concentration is specifically the Languedoc region in the southwest of France. And my examples today, just because of my research, will be primarily Western European and UK based. But this issue that we're discussing here is a global issue. I just wanted to focus on what I was most familiar with. And I don't know if you remember, Melissa, if you saw it or any of the others, I took the title of this lecture from what I ended up screaming while watching a TikTok a few months back, where a man was. Do you remember it?
I don't know if I remember the TikTok, but I have an inkling of what this could be. Oh, actually, wait, no. Oh my god, I just had a brain blast. Yes, I do remember this TikTok.
You remember it?
I was thinking you were referencing this Egyptian coffin that was a couple years ago, but I do know which one you're referencing now. Yes.
I mean, the problem is that it keeps happening, and
Yes,
it's just a blanket statement. Don't get in the coffin. Just don't.
Don't get in the coffin.
Don't do it. Don't do it. But there was a man on a TikTok, and he was talking about his pilgrimage to a medieval German site that was associated with the Knights Templar. And then he talked about how he laid down in the sarcophagus to commune with his Templar ancestors for an hour.
I remember this.
And I was just sitting here in the midst of my heritage tourism moment, being like, how could you be so completely entitled to put yourself into someone else's grave?
Yeah.
The amount of damage that it could have done, that it may have done, I actually don't know. I couldn't find the TikTok when I was looking for it. To try to throw in a screen grab.
Hopefully it is gone from the internet, that no one will get
We
ideas.
can only hope that it has been scrubbed from the internet so no one else gets ideas. But I was just thinking, that tomb, it was built for someone. And even if their remains aren't there any longer, it was made for this person and it had them in mind. And just the arrogance to think that what your fictional, let's be honest, communing with your ancestors in that moment was more important than that person's life and everything that their community had done for them. Because what we really see in archaeology is what you learn about from graves is you don't learn about the person who was buried in them necessarily so much as you learn about the community that was around them, because they're not the ones who chose what to put in the grave or where to be buried or anything like that. It was the people that knew them, that cared about them, that loved them. You're seeing not just one person, but a snapshot of a community at that time. And to have that be potentially damaged because you wanted to have this moment for social media, that really lit a fire in me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was a big fire in me.
Absolutely.
So, and it isn't always to this extreme, obviously. Not everybody's climbing in coffins. But it's that sense of entitlement that I kind of really wanted to talk about when you are a tourist and you're going somewhere that is not your culture, your heritage. I mean, so if you could go to the next slide, Melissa.
I would argue that that's a macroaggression. That's a big problem. But I'm sure that there are microaggressions. There are tiny little things that that has to be at least a little bit on the extreme, because if you're in a museum they won't let you do that, but of course if you're out on a site in the middle of nowhere with no
exactly.
Nope, come on, click, there we go.
Right. So before we really get into it, I just kind of wanted to lay out what I'm talking about when I say heritage tourism. So really it's traveling to places of cultural and historical interest. And this can be for reasons, religious purposes. If you think about the birthright trips to Israel, people going to Mecca, people going to the Vatican, you go to these places for religious purposes. In Ireland, we see a lot of people coming because of familial connections. You're wanting to go and try to find where great-great-grandfather or somebody lived. You're wanting to kind of reconnect with your roots and experience the local culture. Going to the Normandy beaches is another way to do it, because D-Day and the war, World War II, were such significant moments in all of human history. Even if you didn't have a relative there, you can appreciate the significance of that. And then it could be something more like a personal goal, trying to see the 7 wonders of the world, things like that. So these all kind of fall under the category of heritage tourism. If you could hop to the next slide for me. And then we have the people who go because it is a social media opportunity. So traveling to all these places, not because they have any interest in the history or the culture or want to learn any more about it, but because they want the clout of getting the picture or the video, just the content for social media. So the big thing that I would really love for people to take away from today is that I'm here to advocate for slow tourism, sustainable tourism that doesn't wipe out a location's resources and energy, which can still contribute to the local economy, but also promotes learning and appreciation for the history and culture of the place that you're going to. And if you could hop to the next slide for me as well. So this is one of the primary sites for my PhD. It was also a focus of my master's. And as I was kind of telling you before, I really became interested in this subject when I lived with my parents during the pandemic. And they live in the southwest of France, which is the Languedoc region. If you're familiar, just to kind of put it in context with Eleanor of Aquitaine, this would be the region that she had control over during her lifetime. And the legend of Rennes-le-Château is actually what inspired the Da Vinci Code. So if people are familiar with the Da Vinci Code and the idea of the Holy Grail, this church, this village in particular, is what inspired the whole entire thing. Back in the 50s and 60s, there was a whole revival around this church, around something that had happened back in the 1880s. The local parish priest found something. I have no idea what he found, but he found something beneath the church floor while they were doing renovations.
That's so annoying. That's so annoying that we don't know what it is.
Believe me, it drives me so crazy. I'm just hoping.
That's the worst.
Hoping for the day that I find like the one piece of paper.
Great.
But we don't know what it was. Whatever it was, it had some level of value to it because he took a pretty rundown village and church and restored them into beauty. Had enough money to build himself a villa, to build a library for the village and these gorgeous gardens, and just generally improved the lives of the people who lived here. So, when he finds something and you don't know what it is, that just leaves the door wide open to all sorts of different conspiracies. The initial theory is that he found some store of gold from the Albigensian Crusade, which happened in the region. Some of the local lords were known to bury their gold, especially beneath church altars, because they falsely believed that it would be safe from the Crusaders and the Templar Knights that would sweep through afterwards.
Gotcha.
You know how it is.
Yeah, I mean, you think the amount of times that I'm like, why did this Roman guy just bury his stuff and then never come back? Like, it just, Roman hoards make no sense to me. I'm just like, this guy forgot, he lost this, and he was poor for the rest of his life.
That much money?
Yeah.
How do you lose that much money?
It just seems like a dumb decision to just bury something. At least under an altar of a church, you remember where it is. But like
a place marker,
yeah.
Unless you then lose your life in the ensuing crusade.
Understandable, but that's why you have to have. That's why you have to tell at least one person, or send a death letter, or I don't know. You gotta do something.
Or, don't, and just wait for the next 600 to 700 years for an unsuspecting priest to discover it.
Amazing.
As was the case. So the initial thought was that it was some kind of store of gold from the time of that crusade. And then as time went on, the myth just got warped, and instead of gold, it became the Holy Grail. And people decided that, something that could allow for this much money to come into this tiny French parish, it had to be something so incredibly valuable that people would pay a lot of money, either for it or to keep it secret.
Yeah.
So, Holy Grail. And this idea was brought forward by the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which then directly went on to inspire Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. My personal theory about what they found is that they did find just gold from the Albigensian Crusade, because during an excavation they did find human remains of a man who died around that time period.
Okay.
So it makes sense if we're looking at that story through that light. But the problem here is that,
weirdly though, like it also could have been a gold chalice, like because when you say gold, I think most people are thinking, just gold bars, like straight up gold bars.
Right.
But
gold
like
bars,
back
gold
then,
coins.
Back then it was like in coins, it was in jewelry. Like I mean, you wouldn't really get those things. So like, who knows? There could have been a gold chalice in there.
Absolutely.
Like I mean, also it's a church, so they might have also had like the really fancy church ones that you drink wine out of and stuff, and those are definitely made out of gold and very rarely used, so they're in good condition most of the time. So like I mean, I want to make sure that like people, it's like in my mind I'm like, Melissa, it's not gold bars, like don't think gold bars, like think
not gold bars,
not gold bars.
We didn't have
just
gold bars.
A gold hoard of random items
of things made out of gold, or precious metals or whatever it was
exactly
in that.
But no, I mean,
in that one.
That makes sense to me.
But the thing is back in the 50s they really leaned into it, because after the war the region was very destitute, and they needed tourists and they needed people to come in and spend money, and so they said, we'll go ahead and say this is what possibly is happening. We'll just run with this myth and it'll be fine. People will come visit. They'll like look for the grail. It'll be a fun day out for the family. Well, they did. The place was completely swarmed with treasure hunters. And at the point of 1965, the mayor was quoted to have said that the village now looked like Swiss cheese with all the holes that had been dug in to the mountainside.
Oh my God.
Sad but true.
I love that. I mean, you might as well. That's you had it. You had it right there. Swiss cheese.
You had it right there.
God.
If you go to the next slide for me.
Yeah. Nope. I clicked it. There we go. I keep trying to use my keyboard, but it's not working. So I have to use my mouse.
So we have all these treasure hunters coming, and at first it's a fun thing. It's a great thing. People are coming, they're spending money. And then people start to take it a little bit too seriously. And it gets to the point where treasure hunters are attempting to dig into the cemetery. They're attempting to dig beneath the church itself. And it's gotten to the point where in July of 1965, the mayor issued a blanket ban on any kind of excavation. And that excavation ban still remains in place today. So even if I, an archaeologist, wanted to get a team together and do an excavation, I would not be allowed to. I could submit the proposal. The French government would not consider it for a second. They would say, absolutely not. Go away. Wow. And so now we cannot learn anything more about the history of this location.
Amazing.
Really, at all. So what little is written down from the 50s and prior is what we have to go on when it comes to the history of this place. It's a real shame because...
Sorry. No, you keep going.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, do you know if there have been people continually getting caught since that ban? Like, are there still treasure hunters?
Slide, Melissa.
Oh! I was literally just like, is it still, like, I want to know the juicy crime at this point because, like...
Oh, you set me up. Yes. It is still a problem. These photos of the damage were taken in 2018.
No.
So that is how recent the damage that I know of, that I looked up earlier today.
Yeah.
Nothing has happened since then.
Since 2018.
Since the sun has gone down.
Oh my
but so the intact photo of the devil behind the glass is one that I took in 2021. And prior to that is the
Oh, I see.
2018 damage,
So this is the damage, and
where
now
his head,
they have a glass in
yeah.
front of him.
So now they have him protected behind glass,
God.
and that's the baptismal font that he's holding up. That's the holy
Oh,
water
oh yeah.
and everything.
Oh God.
And so his head and hand got hacked off, and that was the poor guy's third head, actually. So the first was the original that got stolen in the 90s, and then the second one got beaten off, and so now the third one is at last check still in place.
Oh my goodness.
And the church is called the Church of Mary Magdalene, which again inspires the whole.
I've now realized
Da
I
Vinci
think I've
Code.
actually heard of this place before.
Probably.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say Catholic schoolgirl here, doing weird research on Mary Magdalene a lot, and I remember hearing about a place in southern France where supposedly Mary Magdalene went after the whole thing and died. Is this that place, or this close to that place?
This is the place.
Oh my gosh, this has been one of my weird bucket list places to go, not because of the crazy treasure hunt, but because I was always kind of interested in like the misunderstood like Mary Magdalene, as I'm like a secret closeted kid who's like being completely beat upon by the church and Catholic school and stuff. But wow, that's wild that this is the same place.
This is it. Yeah, this is that place. And actually, it's interesting because it's not the only place that is associated with Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
There's actually further south along the coast, about 2.5, 3 hours from here. There's a village called Les Saintes-Maries de la Mer, and it's about the Three Marys, and supposedly it's where they landed after escaping the crucifixion. Yes,
that's very interesting.
So there's the connection there, but poor Mary.
Mary.
She's on the bas-relief of the altar. This is the front of the church altar, and the smashed-in piece was from 2018, and then the one just above and behind is the photo I took in 2021.
In 2021. My goodness.
So yeah, as recently as 2018, there are still issues with people coming in and doing damage to this place.
Wild.
And it's yeah. But these are just a few of the incidents, honestly, that have happened here. To talk about this, I would have to have another 5 hours just on this. But then across Europe as a whole, there's just a wider sense that there's a growing issue with tourism, especially tourism based on TV series, books, and films. So if you go to the next slide, I have a couple of statistics for you about European tourism. So conveniently, earlier this week, an article came out on CNN about the projected numbers for tourism this summer, which it focuses on Americans visiting Europe.
Yeah.
But this issue is in no way limited to Americans.
No.
It's a fully international issue.
Yeah.
So if you go to the next one, according to CNN, the number of Americans visiting Europe this summer is up 55% from last year. And so you may be thinking, well, we are still kind of in the post-pandemic world. People want to travel. They haven't been doing that. But then if you hit the next button there, comparing the numbers to 2019, we're at 80% more tourists coming to Europe in 2023 than in 2019, before the pandemic even happened.
This was going to be my question. It was but you just read my mind. I have the exact same mindset, but oh my God. And the funniest thing about it is obviously summer is for American, summer is when kids are off of school and blah blah blah. But I hate the heat. I did the dig in Italy for 5 weeks in July. I went back to England for 2 days to get my flight back home, and I almost died in July. I'm never going back to Europe in the summer again because it's just it is. And the other thing, it's so hot, and y'all don't got air conditioning, and that is wild to we lived in this apartment in Rome for 5 weeks. We had no air conditioning. We only had standing fans, and we kept them on 24/7 even when we weren't there, and we shorted out 2 of them by the end of the 5 weeks. And we were dying, and because there weren't even ceiling fans. It was just
right.
I hate the heat so much, like, and also knowing that tourism goes a little crazy, I'm much more keen to go in the off seasons. Like,
Oh yes,
it's
highly recommend.
I can't-
If you can get to Europe in the fall or in the spring, that is actually the best time to go because the weather isn't shit
yeah,
and tourists generally aren't out in full force yet.
yeah,
Um,
that's insane.
so, hello, excuse me. Can you move?
Oh, the stretch.
Big stretch. So I used to live in Dublin, and I still work there generally when I go into the office. And Dublin, Ireland is one of the top 3 cities on the list of those to visit.
Yeah.
And in the times I've been back recently, I can tell you that there has absolutely been a difference.
Wow.
I lived there for 3 years, and it is so much more crowded already this summer than I have ever seen it.
Yeah.
So if you'll hop on to the next slide for me. Right. So when it comes to tourism, what can we do to improve, and why is this a problem? Because obviously tourism brings in money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like local economies usually thrive off of tourism
Yes.
money, and it's a huge part of the economy, especially in Europe and other places around the world. So the issue comes when we see tourists not spending time in locations, or at least not really spending enough to make their presence lucrative for the damage and wear that they've done. Clerval, I swear.
No, it's okay. Chat loves cat.
This is an important moment.
We have to hammer in.
So, we're looking at like whether or not they're sitting down to eat in local restaurants, or are they going to the big chains, which can be a little bit faster? Are you staying in local hotels, or again, big chains? The rise in Airbnb has been a horrendous thing across all of Europe.
Someone just banned Airbnb. What was it? It was Florence. The entire city of Florence has banned Airbnb. And that's wild to me. And honestly though, I hate, so like I have a very like cheap aesthetic, and like if I ever go back to Europe, I'm only staying in hostels, because I never, knock on wood, when I went around Europe, I didn't have any problems with any hostels. Like some of them were a little sad, some of them didn't have some nice like extras, but like it had a bed and I could sleep on it, and it was 10 euro a night or something. And I'm like, you can't beat that.
And even they're usually really safe, and they also typically have like a private room option.
And that's the thing, is the private room options, even if you get those are still ridiculously cheaper than hotels. So like,
oh yeah, you're still looking at like maybe 25 a night for a private room in a hostel.
I'm not even joking. I can't even get less than 100 a night anywhere here in America. Like,
oh yeah.
My brother goes to school in a very small mountain town, and my dad was he's considering coming to Egypt with me as we're like planning our Egypt trip. And he looked at hotels in Egypt. He's like, in this Boonhick town in North Carolina, it's $130 a night. And in Cairo, Egypt, he could get something for $75 a night. And I'm like, that's not okay. That is not how this should be going.
Not okay at all. It's wild. Ridiculous. In Airbnb, it drives up the rental prices because, lightning. Fair warning. I may lose my power.
I was going to say, I had a thunderstorm right before this too, and we were okay.
Fabulous. We'll make sure that doesn't happen. But it drives up the rental prices, and it prices out the locals and taxes the supply and demand and all that. So if you go to the next slide here, we've seen a lot of recent initiatives from places like Amsterdam in the Netherlands. They're very specifically asking certain types of tourists to stay home. I believe the Netherlands called out young British male tourists. They would like to please stay home, and remind them that this is not just a place for stag do's and hen parties and things like that. It's a city of a huge amount of history and culture. And they are really pushing to stop the nuisance tourism, is what they're calling it. And remind people that Amsterdam is a cultural destination instead of, what it kind of has become in the past. And these photos are from 3 days ago. A friend of mine was actually in Amsterdam conveniently, and she took these pictures and gave me permission to use them. I thought when I saw these, because the trash people in Amsterdam actually went on strike back in February of this year, I thought maybe they're on strike again, and that's why.
Yeah.
But I looked, and I have found nothing about any kind of strike, which is usually very well publicized. So this is just what the streets of Amsterdam look like now.
Do you think some of this, so like we'll say based on some types of tourism, like nuisance tourism, do you think it might be because it is relatively cheap in Europe to go to lots of different places, like that you
Probably.
could just take a 20-pound what's it called, flight to somewhere, then just like bum around for a day, like that's just
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly easy to get around Europe with Ryanair flights in particular. You can usually get, if I'm flying from Dublin to my parents' house, it's like a 2-hour flight and maybe €30. So it's incredibly easy to get around, but we've also seen a rise in the cost of plane tickets because of how many people are coming over. So now they can capitalize on the number of people wanting those cheap flights. They are not so cheap anymore, let me tell you.
Yeah, because I remember my EasyJet flight from London to Italy, and I spent more, because I had literally all of my study abroad things, I spent more money on checking to luggage than on the actual round trip ticket. Because I was like, oh, well that was, I needed to make sure that my luggage would get on, but apparently I'm really cheap to get on.
Exactly.
It's just wild.
So that's another issue as well. So now locals or people who live within Europe and have family in other places in Europe are also now getting priced out of flights to do the travel that previously was such an easy thing. And if you hop to the next slide, I'm going to talk about another pet favorite of mine. Prior to Amsterdam, there was another small village which made a request in January of 2020 for better quality tourists. And this is Hallstatt in Austria. And they had a plan which they intended to launch in May of 2020, prior to the pandemic, which specifically focused on getting rid of busloads of tourists that come in for a few hours, and instead focused on bringing in people who wanted to spend actual time in the village. So they were putting a cap on the number of tourist buses that were allowed to come in. And you got incentives if on that tourist bus you booked a lunch in a local restaurant or had plans to stay overnight. So if you were going to actually spend substantial time in the village, then you got priority to come in and visit. The pandemic for them, and for a lot of places, I think, was actually kind of a relief. If you remember, we all kind of saw those moments where like, Venice is healing. There are dolphins in the canal again.
Oh my God, there's dolphins in the canal. I forgot about that.
Real thing where we all kind of realized if we stop overcrowding these places, it is actually sustainable for life to find a way, as it were.
Now, was Hallstatt because it's just a really cute town, or?
Yes. So Hallstatt is gorgeous, as you can see from these photos here.
The mountain is insane.
A while back, somebody said it looks a lot like Arendelle from Frozen.
Yeah, it does.
And so now a lot of people come to take pictures in the place they think inspired the landscape for Frozen, which is just blatantly not true.
Yeah.
At all.
No. There are plenty of places.
Not Austria.
There are plenty of places in Sweden and Norway and Finland. Because it looks like it's a fjord, but it's just a lake, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
It's
just a lake. Yeah, it's called Lake Hallstatt. And it's actually archaeologists in the chat might be familiar with the Hallstatt culture. And this was an incredibly important culture in the late Bronze Age, early Iron Age. And they have salt mines in the village that have been used since, I think, the Neolithic. But cool. The Hallstatt culture was incredibly important for Central Europe as well in terms of development. And they have some phenomenal museums there. They've got a tour of the salt mine you can take, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage landscape.
Very cool.
So
I was gonna say
very, very well,
because it does look like I saw a TikTok which I'm trying to see if I'm stepping on your toes if you're going to talk about this. But I saw this TikTok of what I think is somewhere in maybe Austria, maybe Switzerland or something, but it looks very similar to this, but it's from I think it's a K-pop drama or like or a C-pop drama where they filmed a portion there where like the big love scene is at the end of this dock, like in the river.
Yeah.
And now busloads of like, if I can't remember if it's China or if it's Korea. I feel like it's China because I know Chinese tourists unfortunately have a little bit of a reputation, but like I feel like it also was a K-drama, so I can't remember. But
it was China.
It was China, yeah. I was gonna say, yeah, and they charge people now to go up and stand at the end of the dock and recreate the love scene, and it's like absolutely outrageous.
And actually, China has built a replica of this because it's so popular. They have a replica of the village. So, yeah. If you hop to the next slide.
Wild.
We'll get to the sad bit.
Oh, goodness.
So, Hallstatt is unfortunately one of our examples of social media tourism. So even if you aren't actually familiar with the village and its name, you have probably seen images of it all over Instagram and TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
It's an incredibly picturesque, beautiful town. It's on the shores of Lake Hallstatt or the Hallstatt Sea. And it's accessible by bus from Salzburg.
Okay.
Busloads of tourists are brought in every day to spend just a few hours in the town and queue at the best places to take an image for social media. And this May, they actually launched a pilot program where they've installed wooden fences to prevent people from queuing up to take photos for social media. They had hoped prior to the pandemic to reduce their tourism numbers by a full 1/3.
Wow.
And they are taking up that initiative again. So on occasion, when people actually come and stay in the town for a few days and take the time to learn the history and things like that, that is hugely appreciated.
Yeah.
Going to take tours of like the salt mines and things and really like focus on the history of this area is huge.
Mm-hmm.
But as you can see from some of these images here, they are not always the most respectful visitors. Locals have put up signs that say quiet please, that, you know, trying to remind people that they actually live here. And in 2018, again, something about 2018, a devastating fire struck and actually burnt out a lot of the original architecture from the 1700s. And the mayor sent out a plea asking people to please stay away, let us rebuild, let us mourn. And people specifically came to see the burnt remains. The church has to hire bouncers to prevent people from interrupting funerals, weddings, and church services. So that's how bad things are in some locations. And this is a UNESCO site, so it has a lot of protections in place.
Yeah.
But this is still an issue that they have.
Goodness gracious.
And then we can hop to the next slide. So then we move into the rise of our TV and film tourism and the marketing of so many tours in Europe these days, using Ireland in particular, an example, since it's all around me. So many of the tours to the north of Ireland are focused on the Game of Thrones film sets. Giant's Causeway and Dark Hedges, a bunch of other places were used as filming locations. And the tours that stop there, even like the ones that are not specifically marketed as Game of Thrones tours, will mention it as a film location. So like Michael has also seen an increase since Star Wars was filmed there. And White Lotus has increased searches for vacations in Sicily up to 300% this year.
Wow.
Similar things are happening in Paris with the Emily in Paris experiences that are going on. And let me tell you now, as somebody who spends a substantial amount of time in France, if you were going to Paris because of your Emily in Paris viewings, you're going to Paris for the wrong reasons.
You're going for the absolute
wrong
reasons. Yeah.
Do not do it.
I will say I've been to Northern Ireland and I did not go on a tour, but I did go to Giant's Causeway. I spent an insane amount of money in the gift shop. But we did pass by the thing. We did pass by like a quarry, and we didn't go in it, but they were like, that was the wall in Game of Thrones, and I'm like, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I don't really know what that means, but I told somebody else that did watch it, and they thought, "Oh, that's cool," and I just. But yeah, you're right. We were on a tour, and and luckily we just passed by it and didn't say anything, but they did mention it, like they always. I think when we were in one part, they mentioned that that's where they're filming. I'm gonna say Braveheart, and it might be wrong, but it might be right. But yeah, it's like those things are always the fun facts that you mention, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So hopping on to the next one here. In Scotland, you're all welcome, by the way.
Yes. Thank you for blessing us with this stream.
Yes. So Outlander obviously has been a popular tourism draw since the books were released.
Yeah, that is
but
true.
even more so since the series began streaming on Stars. And one of the many places that draws the tourists in connection with Outlander is the battlefield of Culloden. And this is Culloden Moor in the Scottish Highlands near Inverness. And this is the place where the Jacobite Scots really lost their battle entirely with the British. It led to sweeping repression of Scottish heritage and culture. Obviously, in the series, we have Jamie Fraser fighting at Culloden and surviving. But unlike history, so many others did not. And the Outlander tourism has brought a huge number of tourists to the area. Great for the local economy, but they don't come to pay their respects to the dead. They come to take pictures with the Clan Fraser sign and think about romanticized fictional characters. I'm noticing a trend. In 2018, the site around the Clan Fraser stone was returfed.
We gotta think of what 2018. What happened in 2018? What was I doing in 2018?
What was I doing in 2018? What damage did I do in 2018?
Well, I'm trying to think. 2018. That's not when the show came out, because the show came out. I'm a huge Outlander fan.
No, the show came out prior to that.
The show when I got into it in. Oh, actually, wait, no, it was very recent though, because in 2018 was when I was working in my gap year, and my friend told me that I should watch this show, and I was like, oh, I don't have Stars, and then our boss gave us a Target gift card, and I went to Target and I bought the season 1, part 1 of the DVD. So I think at the time maybe season 2 was out like in 2018.
Yeah.
But had not like come out on DVD yet. But yeah, I mean that's why 2018? Yeah. That's very interesting.
I don't know. Apparently 2018 was just the year that a bunch of these places saw damage. But also, as recently as March of this year, the stone has been cordoned off to prevent people from getting too close, because the turf that had been redone in 2018 is worn down again.
Yeah.
And if you'll hop on to the next slide, we'll talk about why this is such a problem. Culloden Moor is a graveyard. It's a gravesite. The men who died here were buried in graves here. And these are unfortunately far more shallow than you're probably expecting. I saw some quotes say that the lads here are probably a foot or less beneath the turf. So it's not the standard 6-foot burial. It's not the standard respectful grave. They are buried near and around the stones. The stones are kind of a vague marker, but they're there. They lost their lives in battle. And if you wear down the turf, you run the risk of exposing their remains, and after the indignity they have suffered, they deserve peace. Meanwhile, people are coming to have picnics, they're yelling, they're talking loudly. There's a sign specifically that says, "This is a place of rest, please be quiet and respectful." They're requesting specifically this very kind of somber air. It's not a place to take smiling selfies and reenact a moment of a romantic time with a fictional man. It's a place to reflect on the horrors of war.
Sorry.
We all romanticize Jamie. We all
fantasize about Jamie Fraser, but this is not the time.
Culloden, just don't.
This is not the time.
Anywhere else. This is not the time and place.
Thinking about Jamie Fraser.
Not the time and place. And I feel like I probably should have said this earlier, but I'll say it now and probably again. I don't think there's anything wrong with visiting a place because it has something to do with your favorite book or film or TV show. The big problem comes when you are only visiting that place because of that. You're not there to take part in the local heritage and culture. you're just getting on a bus, you're getting ferried place to place, and only really learning about the TV show and not, spending the time and money.
I will give an example. I am a huge Merlin fan, and this is great. I'm an insane Merlin fan. And when I graduated high school, my mom and we went to Paris, and we were there for, I think, 10 days. Not even joking you, we did quite literally everything. So much so that when I went and studied abroad, I was like, I don't need to go back to Paris. I've literally seen everything. And on the second day, I was like, Mom, we're going to go to Pierrefonds. And she was like, where is Pierrefonds? And I was like, I don't know, but we're going to go find it. And like,
you're finding it.
We had to take the train to Champagne and then take a taxi for like 30 minutes. Because again, like, the castle that they filmed Merlin in was an original castle, and they restored it, I think, actually technically for the show, but also I think it is obviously a historic castle and stuff. But I think they helped maybe fund some of it so that they could film it there. And it was like the greatest moment of my young life. I literally just saw a TikTok of a girl going to see it for the first time, and I was like reliving everything. I was like, oh my gosh.
I think I saw that same TikTok.
We're all on the same TikTok algorithm. But I was literally like, oh my god, this is exactly what I did. But like, we still went. Like, I did buy a tiny little Merlin action figure and an Arthur action figure for my best friend, because they had a small little Merlin section of the merch store. But afterwards, like, me and my mom went into the town. We went and got sandwiches from this place. We got ice cream, and it's like it is literally the cutest little town outside of this castle. Like, you're just looking up, there's a castle, and there's just like this little town square and a pond and a church and an ice cream shop, and it's just like was the most cute little idyllic little French town. And my mom still tells me, she's like, yeah, that was the best, like, completely random trip. Like, of course, my mother, who's never seen an episode of Merlin in her life, was like, it was a beautiful castle. They had lots of cool stuff about the show and about the castle. And she was like, it was great. And she loved it. And I will 100% go back again, because the town was just so nice and like really quiet, honestly, in comparison to like really busy Paris. So it is possible.
And that is how you do it. That is what you do. You go and you get your moment, you get to see the thing, but then you go and you spend time. You spend a little bit of money. I know it's not, something obviously that's accessible to everybody.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you kind of have to pick your moment. And you can't see everything. You can't do everything. It's not possible. Yeah. So pick what you were really passionate about. Spend the time, spend the effort there.
Yeah.
It's because if you're not spending any money in the place, then you're not contributing to the upkeep of what you love and the livelihoods of the people who live there.
Because there are of course like heritage sites. I'll click to the next slide. There are of course heritage sites that don't charge tickets. Like, I'm sure Culloden Moor, like there's no like Pierrefonds, you did have to spend money to go inside of it and stuff, but there are plenty of places where you don't have to buy tickets, and
there are so many.
And so
there's
it's
so
like
many. I was just out at Corley Trackway, which is in Longford town, not far from me, and it's free admission. And you get to go in and you see a preserved section of this road that they built through the bog in the Bronze Age or the Iron Age. I can't remember.
One of those.
I'm a medievalist.
I'm an Egyptologist. I don't know the difference. Believe me, the Bronze Age did happen in Egypt. Do I know when it happened? Absolutely no idea. No idea. It's not in the timeline that I taught, so I don't know. But yeah. I mean, that's so awesome. That's cool.
Moments like that. Well, it's free. And we went and we spent the time, and we ended up buying something in the gift shop because we had such a great time. We wanted to contribute to the running of the place. Do things like that. That's easy.
Make
and
a
also
donation.
You get a cute little souvenir to take home. Make a donation. Absolutely.
Anything like that.
So moving on here, we have the Game of Thrones tourism in Croatia. North of Ireland is just a little a few years behind, really, the curve of the Outlander tourism in Scotland, and a few more further behind that of Hallstatt in Austria. So at the moment, a good number of the comments and reviews on the subject of this kind of tourism in the region are positive. In 2021, it was reported by the University of Sadar, Game of Thrones tourism brought in around 180.7 million euro, about 203.1 million USD into Croatia between 2013 and 2018,
Wow.
which is huge.
That's huge.
But during that time period, and even as recently as April of this year, there's been difficulty with finding enough people to work there during the busy tourist season. There's also the trouble of overcrowding in the city. This city has been on the UNESCO World Heritage List since 1979 for how incredibly well preserved the medieval city is. This is one of our best examples of a medieval harbor town that is still in existence. And film tourism is something that's really still on the early end of study in academia. It's mostly been since the rise of social media that it's become such a huge industry. In 2019, they've considered a ban on new restaurants in Dubrovnik, to the point where even if a restaurant closes, a new one cannot take its place. And as of this summer, they're also putting a ban on outdoor tables. As someone familiar kind of with a European summer, I'm sure you're familiar with how much of a staple an outdoor table is.
Well, I mean, when I went everywhere, like whenever I toured anywhere, if it was nice outside, I always told myself, eat at even myself, because again, like I was usually traveling by myself, and I was like, go to a slightly touristy area, but eat with the view. That was always my kind of way to do it. I was like, eat with the view. So like when I went to Florence, I sat right in front of the Duomo on an outdoor table by myself with my little journal, and I got tiramisu because I was like, I didn't really have as many specifications about like going to look for good food or anything like that. Like I just wanted somewhere where I could at least communicate, because the anxiety of not being able to communicate with somebody who's making your food is definitely there. And so like wanting to have that, but then also wanting to sit somewhere nice and just like, because you're by yourself, you don't got anything to do, so you might as well look at something pretty. So like the outdoor table was the life when I was in Italy. Like it was.
It's huge. It's a peak. But this ban, prohibits that because of the overcrowding. And in, again, 2018, UNESCO issued a warning to the city of Dubrovnik that if they did not make changes, the listed old city could not sustainably handle the volume of tourists coming to the area. And if change was not made, if protections were not put in place, then they ran the risk of the city deteriorating and potentially being removed from the UNESCO World Heritage List.
Whoa.
Which is something they have done before.
They have? I was going to ask that, because I never heard of places getting removed.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
They did it, God, I can't remember. It was the Danube, somewhere in the Danube River Valley in Germany.
Oh, really?
They had it on there for the outstanding universal value of just like being a beautiful locale that has constantly been inhabited by humans.
Interesting.
And then in the 90s, it got really built up, and they built a bridge across it without getting the proper permissions, and UNESCO removed it.
That would make sense.
So they're working on getting it back on, actually. They've made a lot of improvements. You should Google it. Everybody is watching.
I definitely have to. I am Hungarian.
It's an example of...
We love the Danube.
Yeah.
We love the Danube.
We do. It's an example of how you develop things well. They've added so much green space back in.
That's good.
It's amazing what they've done.
Wow.
And if they can do it, so can everyone else.
Yeah.
So, next slide, please.
Last question about Croatia.
Yes.
Do you think that it started off well because in general, in comparison to a lot of the other places we've talked about, it was not a huge tourist area?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Croatia and kind of the Balkan countries in general have really only kind of become more touristy since the 2000s.
Yeah.
Since the end of the conflict era. And they did not have any of the infrastructure in place for this kind of thing. And they're working on it, it seems, but they're way behind what they actually need.
And I'm sure that's probably why they also chose to film there. Because I know that like a lot of TV shows, like one of my other favorite TV shows, Psych, takes place in Santa Barbara, California. It is filmed entirely in Vancouver.
Absolutely.
I mean, the amount of things that are filmed in the big filming places in America are like, which not in America, in North America, are Canada, Vancouver being one of them, and like Atlanta. Like all of the Marvel stuff is filmed in like a huge Atlanta studios, and so it's just like
you get the tax incentives. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Also, my friend Alex says Dresden Elbe Valley, the Arabian, that's the one. So the Arabian Oryx Sanctuary and the Liverpool Maritime Mercantile City have been removed from the list. Those are the three.
Yep.
Alex is my fact finder. And the
Nice.
Bagardi
you,
Cathedral is partially delisted. That sounds even worse than getting fully removed from the list. Delisted.
Yeah, it's one of those this is your final warning moments.
Yeah. Goodness. I'm gonna have to look those up later, Alex, because I want to know why.
Yeah. Do it. Yeah. Yeah. Dresden.
Dresden.
Yeah,
I know Dresden. Yeah. Interesting.
So the north of Ireland is even further behind the curve than Croatia. So the increase in Game of Thrones tourism has really been welcomed and embraced, and most of the advertisements and bus tours that you see around here, which draws people in, it takes them around specifically to different filming locations, and it's benefited the economy hugely. So an estimated 350,000 out-of-state visitors came to Northern Ireland specifically for Game of Thrones in 1 year.
Wow.
And they spent around in excess of £50 million at various attractions along the north coast in Belfast. So huge, wonderful thing for the economy. These numbers are fantastic.
Yeah.
And if people continue to come and visit and spend their money in the area, again, that is amazing. That's wonderful. But we're also now starting to see the decline in the locations. We're at the very beginning of this new cycle here. The Dark Hedges, which were a filming location,
beautiful.
It's in a rural part of the country. And with the rise in people visiting and the bus tours, local traffic is having difficulty, and the trees in the hedges are beginning to show signs of damage and wear. We have the ability to alter and preserve these locations and share the history as well as the interest in the TV. But it's one of those moments where we have to really act in a timely manner in order to make a change. And I included this top picture here because it's one of my pet peeves when heritage locations don't have signage to tell you what this place is and why it's important. And the fact that Theon Greyjoy gets his own sign when so many heritage places don't have signs makes me so angry. I saw this picture and I screamed a little bit.
Oh my God.
Because of how angry I was.
Yeah, that is definitely wild.
This village in this harbor has its own history, a phenomenal, interesting history. Fishing history in Ireland is fascinating. But do they talk about that? No. They talk about why it was important that he did something here, which is just...
That's outrageous.
Unfortunate.
Absolutely wild.
So then if you'll hop on to, I believe this is my final slide, aside from references. So how can we be good tourists? I promise it is so much easier than it seems. When you're searching for locations to travel, I'm not going to ask you to avoid popular locations. I'm not going to ask you to not go somewhere because your favorite TV show or film or whatever was shot there. They're generally popular tourist destinations for a reason. What you can do to be a good tourist is to consider, as I said in the beginning, the practice of slow tourism. Think about where you want to go and think about why. If it's purely because of the book or TV show and film, pass on it. Or take the time to research and look into that region's history and heritage. Plan to go not just for the filming locations for an hour and then leave. Spend time in the city. If you can stay in the area for 2 or more days, phenomenal. Do that if you can. I know that's not always possible. Buy something in the shop. Buy lunch at a local shop. Make sure that you're taking the time to find places to eat and stay that are locally owned. Avoid chains, avoid Airbnb or self-service apartments owned by corporations. Really, I'll just say it over and over again. Do your research. And again, if you don't have any interest in a place aside from the TV show, just accept that maybe it's something that can be enjoyed from the TV show and instead look for somewhere else. And I found a quote about different tourist interests that kind of bothered me. And I don't like to believe this is true about most people. Where it was, tourists do not embark on their journeys in search of authenticity, but are often more interested in experiencing what has been promoted through the powerful visual media than gazing at so-called dead history. But I think we all know from TikTok and other social media, interest in history is so far from dead. And like everybody here is obviously proof of that. And everybody in our community on TikTok is huge proof of that.
Absolutely.
So just be mindful about the impact you're making and think about how you would feel if this was your home that was suddenly impacted by an influx of people being disrespectful. And think about, if some place is really important to you, how much you would like to bring someone back to that place, like your children or your parents or a friend that you really want to experience this place. What would you do if that place was no longer available and accessible because of the damage that has been caused? So just be mindful, do your research, and if you think that this place is somewhere that's absolutely worth going, go, enjoy it, have the best time, and just make sure that you are being respectful of the people who live there. And that's really all I've got for you. So
amazing. I think I actually have an applause sound.
Aww.
I have sounds. I know how to do audio.
And I do, in light of certain things, my references are listed on the next 2 slides.
Yes,
so.
And I'm going to have them, so if anybody would like some of the references, you can just hit me up and I will copy them over to everyone.
Same.
But thank you so much, Grace. Does anybody have any questions? Ask away. I know I have a couple little anecdotes of just the other things that I've been thinking about. Like, the one I'll say right now is, like, ironically, we'll say this, and this is sometimes some of the tourist places that you are expected to go see, like that are the top big places, sometimes they won't be that great, or they won't toss your fancy, let's say. And my example might be shocking to people, and we're just gonna roll with it.
Here we go.
I was living in Italy. I was living in Rome on my archaeological dig, and every weekend we had off. And I'm a very, this is the thing, is that everybody on this dig had only been there for the 5 weeks. I at that point had been in Europe for 7 months. I was a little bit homesick. I was a little bit like ready to go kind of back home, but I had also really perfected my tourist thing, like to go and do different things. I had really perfected it. I had discovered when I was in England that, like, taking photos is not the best thing. Sometimes you just need to absorb some stuff. It was mostly when I saw a lady with an iPad try to take a picture of a Van Gogh in London, and I was like, you can get a better picture from the internet, ma'am. And so I stopped taking pictures. There's actually
buy a print.
Yeah, it actually was that one. It was the sunflowers. It was
buy a print.
Yeah, like there are better ways to do this. And so I was like, I didn't really like, this is my other thing, is that because I had been doing it on my own for 7 months, I was literally like, I'm just gonna do it by myself. I'm not gonna invite any of my roommates. I had 6 roommates. I was like, I'm just gonna go. And so I woke up really early one morning and I'm like, I'm gonna get to the Colosseum first thing in the morning, and I'm gonna go buy a ticket because I didn't want to wait in line. I got there before it opened. I waited in line. I bought the ticket and I essentially ran straight up to the 2nd floor, and I was the only one there. I was like completely alone. I have to admit, I was probably only there for about half an hour. It was the Colosseum. It was big. It was cool. There wasn't a lot of signage that I saw when I was there, and I just, like, I don't know, just didn't really fit my vibe. This is very controversial, I know. And so what did I do? I was like, I guess we're just gonna hit up some other things. We're gonna do something. So I walked from the Colosseum to Hadrian's Baths, which is kind of back in that area. I was there for so long. For so long. I wandered around near Hadrian's Bath. There's also a I don't know the actual Roman word, but like a big track area where they like would have done like games and stuff.
The circus?
Yeah, the circus. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I walked around there and I was like, did all this, and then I was just there. I was there for so long. But I was at the Coliseum when it wasn't busy. It wasn't hot. It was like at 9 in the morning, and like in the shade it was cool. And it's cool from the outside. I've kind of figured it out. It's cool from the outside. It's not that cool, at least to me, from the inside. That was the thing.
I mean, I agree. I feel like it's really kind of overhyped. It's a very cool place in general, but it is one of those things where like kind of seeing it from the outside is much more impressive than being on the inside. And it's also not as big as you kind of expect it to be.
That was
Kind
also
of
part of
similar
it.
to what someone was saying about the pyramids, is like they take photos to make it look bigger. It's not as big as you expect it to be. And I had so much more fun wandering around the forum and wandering around the circus than I did in the Colosseum. So
Sorry,
one of those.
I'm trying to delete this comment, but I'm very ban you. Go away.
Goodbye.
There we go. He's gone. Okay. I don't have a mod with me, so I'm doing all the modding.
Oh,
no. Yeah. So I'm just going back up. Pyramids at Giza. Well, it's one of the things that I've been telling people when I am preparing my like trip to Cairo and like to Egypt. Like Giza and Cairo are not my number one city. My number one city is absolutely Luxor, like because and that just kind of tends with my closer to my interests. And like I do want to go in the pyramids and I do want to see them, but like I also know that like you see them and you see them. Like they're there. You can see them from almost everywhere in Cairo and Giza, and like in general, that the city does not have as many larger tourist things besides that. I mean, most people don't even stay in Cairo; they stay in Giza,
right?
Which is technically two different cities, even though they're melded next to each other.
Yeah.
But does anybody else have any questions? Oh, sorry, Alexandria. You may have mentioned this, but I am backpacking / camping to various megaliths this November. Is having my pack and rolled mat going to be seen as rude because it's bulky? That's a very good question, actually.
I don't think so. It would depend on how you're planning to travel around. I am interested. So you're going camping at all of these sites in November.
I want to know. Are you doing camping?
How good are you with the cold and wind? Because we all have a problem with heat for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't think it will be too much of a problem, honestly, as long as you remember to say hello to everybody. Whenever you walk into a shop or a store or a restaurant, you greet the person as a person. One of my favorite anecdotes about this is in my parents' village, there's a wonderful pizza parlor, and the main waiter, his name is Olivier. And when you go in, you greet Olivier and you have the best night because he's so charming and just wonderful, and it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And one night we were already seated and we witnessed this British couple walk in, and they didn't say hello. They didn't say good evening. They didn't ask how he was. They just said, table for two. And he paused, and in the most French and dramatic way, he just looked them up and down and said, bonjour, and refused to serve them until they had been like, oh, right, of course. Hello. And then carried on.
Yeah.
So just remember to be polite, greet people, treat them as humans. If you're speaking a language and they switch to English, it's not because you're bad at it necessarily, it's because they want to avoid a miscommunication.
Yeah.
And people in Europe have to learn English from such an early age that it is genuinely easier for them to switch to English than it is to kind of try to parse out what you're trying to say in their language.
Yeah.
So, try not to get offended at that. If they do it, it's for their own benefit, really.
Yeah.
To make sure that there's no miscommunications here. And if you want to practice the language, tell them that. If they're willing to do it, amazing. If they don't have the time, if they're a waiter at a busy restaurant, they don't have time. They're going to switch to English.
Yeah. And there definitely are, when it comes to language, I find there are definitely some stereotypes depending on some countries. From what I've gathered, Germans are all for it. If you want to practice with them, they will practice with you.
Absolutely.
We love the French, but they love their language, and I was very graced to have an actual French teacher teach me French, and so she gave us the very good insights as to why the French people love their language so much, and why they respect it so much, and why they might come off a little snooty because they don't.
Sure,
And then I had a conversation with someone where I was explaining this to them, and I was like, I mean, yeah, English took a lot of French words and used it in English, and they were like, no, they didn't. And I was like, oh, let me write you a list, man. Rendezvous. And I just started like listing off all of the words that we say, like RSVP is RSVP.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, all these words that we use in English every day that are French that we have taken. And like, I showed them up very quickly, which was nice, but
Good. As you should.
But
and
yeah.
I, like, if it makes anybody else feel better, I have been speaking French as long as I can remember. And when I go back, if I haven't been there for a while, sometimes I even get switched on. So like I have a very, very good knowledge of French, and on occasion they'll switch to English because like I don't have time to deal with you right now while you get reacclimated.
The last time I was in Hungary, I sat down at a restaurant, again wanting for a view. I sat down in an outdoor thing, and the guy very quickly like said hello, and I said hello back, which luckily is the same translation pretty much. But then he asked me what I wanted, and I said, "Oh, chicken paprikash," and I said it like that because that's how my family has always said it. And he left, he came back, gave me water, and started speaking to me in full Hungarian. And I was like, oh, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't speak." The other thing I said, the only Hungarian word I know is köszönöm, which is thank you. And I said köszönöm to him for the first time. And he came back full Hungarian, and I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't speak Hungarian." He goes, "Oh, I thought you were Hungarian," and walked away. And I almost cried because like my grandparents were born there. I don't know the language because language is hard, and then when your grandma tries to teach you a language with 12 vowels, it just you don't want to learn it at 14. Like, it just doesn't happen.
It's a problem.
I hate to say.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I wish I had been raised in it earlier, but yeah, it's like there are many countries are more than happy to, and that's my one thing. There are these travel YouTubers that I used to watch a lot, and most of the time they are very respectful, and they do a lot of we'll say excursions that other people don't do, which I think is very popular now with lots of travel bloggers and stuff, where they'll, like, I think recently they just went and they were in the jungle of Indonesia and like with like a community essentially. But the one thing I've always noticed they don't do, and it annoys the crap out of me, is that they do not attempt in any way to speak a native language. Like, they do not, like, they don't even learn the basic words. And that is one of the things that I will do. I will learn hello, I will learn excuse me, because I always need that when you're on the metro or something. Thank you, like, please. Like, I will always try to learn those words. And it really, really annoys me that they have been to over 100 countries, and in very, very rare places that I've seen them ever use those.
Yeah. It's so strange to me that you're not making an effort to try. You want to visit this place, but you don't want to make an effort to learn just the very basics of the language to be polite. Like, it's, 3 or 4 words.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to try to remember.
Yeah. Yeah, Moose, it's definitely correct. A lot of things, she's saying that this is in the 80s, that people in Paris tended to be more rude, but when you went outside of Paris, and I mean, I think from what I've heard of people who've been there recently, that does kind of still happen. But it is, I don't doubt that more cities with lots of different, that encounter tourists a lot, will already be at least a little bit more annoyed / rude than when you go out to places in the middle of nowhere. Like, I think that no matter where that is, but it is pretty prevalent, I think, from what I've heard recently in Paris.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm always a staunch defender of Parisians.
No, and I mean, I try to be as well. I try to be that middle line person, because it's like, half because I've learned about like why French people like love their language so much and hate that, but also because I'm like, not everybody can be mean. Like, it's kind of in that way. Like, not everybody. Like I didn't have that bad experiences when I was in Paris, truly.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's kind of, how much effort you're putting into it. Yeah. But also, even if everybody has a bad day, honestly. And if you live in Paris, you are so constantly surrounded by tourists, so constantly surrounded by people kind of doing typical tourist things, that I fully understand their lack of patience for them. Which, then reflects poorly and things like that. But I will defend the Parisians until I die. But I will say also that once I go down to my parents' village,
I'm sure it's great. I'm sure
everybody is so sweet and helpful. Sure it's like great. A village of Oliviers, honestly.
Yeah. So bathroom,
we have a good time.
Bathroom's another good word. Emergency,
Offer's a
sorry,
good one.
help.
Help is a very good
Yeah.
one, yeah. Speaking of, I'm going to go off on a brief
for
tangent
it.
because of a series of TikToks I
Oh.
have seen recently pushed
Absolutely.
across my page where travel influencers have been talking about the friends they make on the plane or on the bus or whatever. And I saw one girl say she made friends with a German man on the plane and he offered to give her a ride. And I said, that is quite literally the opening to Taken.
I was gonna say I just saw a video about a girl who met a guy in a restaurant, and he took them not on a plane, but on like a weird fighter jet kind of plane. And I just saw that video, and I think that was in America. I still don't think that may have not been travel, but that was the most wild video I've ever seen in my life.
I'll tell you what, it just, no matter where you are, do not accept
Do
rides
not
from
do that.
strangers.
Do not do that.
Do not go to a secondary location with them. We just recently had 2 young American women die in Germany because they went with a man to a secondary location and got pushed over a cliff.
Yep.
Now, granted, the man was American, not German.
Yeah.
It's being misreported.
No,
he was
that's-
American.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
I was
it's not all
actually very
Germans.
worried because my best friend is currently living in Prague, and I was like, and I know she's been to Neuschwanstein. I know she's been there before, and I was just like,
Yeah.
okay. And then I looked at the ages, and I was like, thank God she is older than that, so that she cannot be one of the unnamed girls. But I was just like, I don't know where she is at any time. But
I don't know what it is. Like, I sometimes look back on my own like early 20s and I'm shocked that I survived. You know, I've had my moment of running across Rome at 3 a.m. all by myself. But it's honestly a miracle that I made it.
I will tell my one and only. This is pretty much my one and only story about ever being in like a creepy situation. And I don't know, maybe I just have like a mind of steel or something. But this situation, I laughed about it in the moment and after the moment. I was living in London. I was I was at my roommate's at my friend's apartment in Camden, and I had to get back all the way down to like King's Cross Station where my apartment was. Oof. But it was 1 a.m. and I thought I had enough money on my Oyster card, and I did not. And the only place you can top up your Oyster card is a tube station, which are closed. So I was like, okay, we're gonna have to walk the half hour to my apartment at night on like a Friday night. So I called my mom because luckily the time difference worked out great. And so I'm just like, Mom, you're not gonna be happy about the situation, but we're just gonna talk for a half an hour, okay? And she's like, okay. And so she was luckily, so we just talked, we caught up, and as I am like walking up the hill and I can see my huge apartment complex, I'm like, all right, Mom, I'm gonna let you go. I will text you when I get in the building or whatever. And there were some, like, I could tell some drunk guys over by King's Cross or whatever, and just didn't think anybody of it. Everywhere else was just completely empty. And by my building was this cherry blossom tree, and there was a low-hanging branch, and I just put my hand up, and I just kind of felt some of the little blossoms, and then just like walked on. And suddenly I realized there is somebody behind me. There's somebody walking behind me, and I'm listening to like blaring music in my headphones. And I'm like, someone's behind me, and they were kind of far behind me. So I'm just like, okay, just keep on walking. And I walk at a very fast pace. So I'm just walking, and then they kind of come up like right next to me. Automatically, probably the reason I wasn't that intimidated is this person was very short, and I'm a very tall person, but this person was very short, and I think I was just like, I can just push him over. Like, I was like, yeah. And I think that's just my mind. But I'm listening to my music. I didn't even bother taking out my music. And this man was a very, very little short man. I have no idea if he was drunk. I didn't even listen to him. Like, I literally just ignored him. But what I noticed was that he tried to hand me, I can't stop laughing. This is the funniest thing that's ever happened to me. He handed me a full branch of that tree. And in my head, I'm like, did he just rip that off the tree?
For me?
For me? And I was trying not to lose it because I thought it was the funniest situation I've ever been in. And so he said something to me, and I was just like, no, go away. And I'm just listening to my music, not hearing him, and he's still kind of, and I was like, and I literally said, cover your ears if you don't want to hear a curse word. I literally said, no, that's the fucking creepiest thing I've ever seen. That's what I straight up said to this man. He just like kind of like said it, and again, I'm not listening to him. I full don't hear any word he says. And then he just left. He just turned around, and then I got back to my, and then of course, as soon as it ended, my heart's beating like crazy. I'm like running back, and I'm like in the thing, and I texted my friend I was hanging out with, and I was like, yeah, some creepy guy tried to follow me home and ripped a part of a tree off. And she calls me immediately, she's like, are you okay? And I'm laughing and laughing and laughing. And I know that I should have been so scared, but it's just, I don't know. It's absolutely the most wild thing ever. But yes, it's like, it's just,
oh my God.
touristing and like, just being safe. It's just like, I mean, everywhere at this point, you have to be safe. Like, it's just, even in your own freaking place.
Yeah. Even in your own neighborhood, just don't go to secondary locations.
Convenient.
Don't do it.
Punch height against tall people. I mean, yes, truly, like he was at least this short in comparison, like to my shoulder.
Amazing.
And I just was like, yeah, I could take him no matter what.
I get those.
But does anybody have any other questions for Grace? I'm trying to think of. Because this is like, I was trying to think of like obviously I haven't been to Egypt yet, but like I'm trying to think of some suggestions for Egypt specifically for stuff like this, because in my research of preparing to go to Egypt, I have found it very, very hard to go to Egypt without a tour group. I found very little blogs, very little travel suggestions that are not in a tour group. Like I found this amazing blog that went over like a 10-day itinerary about Egypt, giving great advice, giving like spreadsheets of budget, and then when I looked like a little deeper into it, they had paid a tour group. And it wasn't one of the huge tour groups where you're on a group with the whole people. It was a private tour group that they planned the trip for them, they took them around stuff. And I've told this to people on the stream before, I don't want to do that because, and it's this kind of horrible cocky thing, it's like I know more than you kind of. It's like I want the person for language, I want them for safety, I want them to take me to modern Cairo stuff, to modern Egypt stuff, because I don't know anything about modern Egypt in comparison. But I don't need you to tell me all the things that I know. And like Nat, one of my followers, she just came back from Egypt and had a tour group, and she would be occasionally asking me questions if these things were correct. And a lot of tour leaders say they are Egyptologists, which if you take a couple courses, like I don't doubt that some of these, like, because it is such a huge, it is the only huge industry in Egypt, truly. Like, I mean, tourism is their biggest industry. Like, I'm sure that they do require, maybe in these like larger tour groups, to take classes and stuff, but they don't know how to. I took multiple classes and to read the language, like I all these things. But yeah, and that's the very thing. Like, Iron Chef is like, I might know the location of things, but I don't know how to drive in these places. I don't know how to get taxi cabs in these places. I don't. Like, another thing is, outside of Giza, there's all these other pyramids to the south of it. They're not in any cities. Like, how do I get there? And these are things that I haven't found answers to, except you literally go on a tour, or you are at a larger hotel where you can just go up to like the concierge desk essentially and be like, I need some guy to take me these places. But that's very touch and go as well. And so when it comes to heritage, like, the other thing is, Egypt is probably, I mean, I'm sure there's like still a couple other places, but I would say Egypt as a whole is probably a only heritage tourism kind of place. Like, if that makes sense, that like
I mean, it's the big draw for people to go to Egypt is specifically their cultural heritage, to see the pyramids, to see the temples, and the archaeology and things like that.
There's probably less non-ancient Egypt stuff that I mean, I found all these different museums for past like the viziers of Egypt, and like you can go around their house, and like they've restored like these temples and mosques and stuff, but like I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
tourists go there.
Right.
Yeah.
Egypt is always been an interesting kind of conundrum for me. I'm very focused on the European stuff, but I'll glance down at Egypt on occasion because you know how all of the history kids, like, they had a thing. I was an Egypt kid.
Yeah.
Like, and
I was
so
obviously
I
an
knew
Egypt
all
kid
sorts
as well.
of stuff, and I really wanted to go and do these things. But the more I look at it, the more I'm just kind of like, it's not for me on that passion level of you know, not that it's not worth going. What are you doing? Sorry, the cat has decided to make some unnecessary noises.
No, yeah, it's a difficult place to go.
It's a very difficult place to go. And are you going to have, I hate saying this, but is there a man going with you?
So I was going to go with 2 of my friends, and that was going to be in February, and plans kind of have fallen through. And essentially at this point, my dad was like, "Can I go with you?" And I was like, "I will take anybody at this point because I don't want to go alone." And the problem is because my dad can take off whenever he wants, like he really can, like with his job. My mom is a teacher, so she can only do summers and like holidays, but there is no way in fire burning hell that I'm going to Egypt in the summer.
Absolutely do not go to Egypt in the summer.
I'm not even joking you, like, just knowing myself, and like I will literally die. Like I will literally pass out. I've never passed out in my life. It would happen.
Absolutely.
And so the plan, which of course my dad is like, "I'm not the planner of the family. Your mother's the planner of the family. I'm the money. So like, if you plan it and present it and it seems reasonable, I'll do it." And I'm like, you say less words, man. But now I just need to take all of the stuff that I had for when I was in like February of last year, and now I have to just convert it over to like work it out and stuff. But Anna, no, that's the rough plan, not Christmas, but the rough plan is New Year's / my birthday in Egypt. That's the rough plan, because the thing is, I don't want to not include my mom because she has read like almost every paper I've ever written on Egypt. She knows more about the Amarna period than like anybody else.
The ghost has made its presence known.
Oh my gosh.
That's a husband.
That's
not
a husband. I see the husband. Did that just shatter, or did something just tip over? Like,
no, it knocked over one of my egg cups when I had up there, so that probably shattered.
Oh
but...
no! Oh my goodness.
Hey, don't walk in the glass, buddy.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it didn't shatter, just a little. We're fine.
Oh, that's good. Oh my goodness.
We're good.
Absolutely wild. Nothing like a ghost, just to add.
Nothing like a ghost.
Nothing like a ghost, just to add all the.
You know. Well, it's the occupational hazard of living in Ireland.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my goodness. See, this is the thing, Nat, is like the potential is like maybe in future MelissainDeNile will give tours of Egypt. Like that's like a huge pipe dream, but like that's the pipe dream I want to have. So, but I gotta go there first. I'm gonna go.
Yeah, you gotta get there first.
I gotta get there first myself before I plan. No, Claire, that was not a cat. That was purely the poster pushed over everything, or the ghost pushed the poster over everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wild. Well.
Local. Yeah, just in case.
No. Yeah.
I'll put out a bit of an offering tonight to apologize to them for saying it.
Put a little coin in the egg cup and say, "I apologize."
They're all just like, "You are supposed to be in bed by now."
That's probably what they're saying. Absolutely.
How dare you still be up disturbing our sleep?
But I'll give out one last questions for Grace. Actually, you know what, I should check. I'm going to check our Discord because I do have a lecture questions thing there that I said if anybody had any questions previous to the stream, they should put there. And let me just see if anything is there. Nope, this is all about Anna's, about pirate archaeology that I put there to remind myself to ask her those questions. But Grace, this was the best. Awesome. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for
have learned so much. And I miss
Yeah.
Europe, and this is just telling me I have to go back to Europe. My roommate's going to Paris with her sister in like October, and I have been trying to get back to England for so long because now I have so many cool people that are there, in England and in the UK, like, and I've been meaning to get back there because that was the plan. The plan was also to potentially see if I can get to England, like do connecting flights in England before going to Cairo, and also seeing friends that are over there as well. But
Absolutely. Well, Anna and Ali are both going to come see me at some point, so jump on the train.
I need to tag along.
Yeah, and I'll let it be known I'm meeting Grace this autumn.
Dang it! I gotta plan something. Gotta plan something. I have to. There's too many things. Oh, that's what I was thinking of. When you were talking about like only going to places for like a film location. This is a problem that I've been encountering because I have on my website, which you can look on, I have a map of every museum that has an Egyptian collection, and I am trying to go to all of them within my lifetime, obviously.
Nice.
But a lot of them are, and we're mostly focusing in America, although if you look at France, the list is insane. I essentially found some random list on the internet of all of the French museums so like if you look at the map, it's like Europe, the big cities, and then it's every tiny little museum in France, because I'm counting anything that has like the smallest object. Like I'm talking like just a couple objects. And I apparently found some weird list on the internet that listed pretty much every local museum in like really small towns. But I have this problem where I'm like, when am I going to go to Cleveland? And I'm like, when am I going to go to Kansas City? And I'm just like, am I going to really plan a whole trip around just going to see this museum? And because in my mind, one of the only ways that I can do this, well, it's like economically and like just like easily, is to do a giant road trip, which like I think is the best way to make sense, because so like my cousin is getting married in Fort Worth, Texas in September, and so I've already put in an extra day so that I can bum around and go to the Kimball Art Museum because it's there. And like I was just in a conference in Richmond, and I took a half day of the conference and I went to the museum there to like film content and stuff. But it's like there are these just random places that I'm like, am I going to essentially waste a huge plane ticket to go there when I would just have to make up the rest of the things to do? But now this is giving me a new insight that I just should do that.
I mean, it's just, there's so many different places and things to see and do, and like I feel like a lot of people, when they come to Europe, they know it's going to be like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And so everybody tries to squeeze in as much as they can do and try to get to all of the different sites. They want to get their picture of all the different sites to prove that I was there and I did this thing. But it's one of the things that we kind of all just have to eventually face, really, is that we will not get to every single place on our bucket list unless you have unlimited funds and time, in which case I have a PhD postdoc funding idea that I would love to discuss.
Love.
But, you know, it's something where I'm fully aware that I'm never going to get to. I have this goal, this huge goal in my head of going to every single UNESCO site in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
And
great.
I know there is absolutely no chance. No chance.
I'm stupidly confident that I'm going to go and see every single Egyptian collection. Like, I'm going to try to get to the big ones. Maybe I won't get all the small ones in France, but like...
Maybe. The big ones.
Yeah, I gotta get the big ones.
Exactly. So it's like I have a list, you know, of like the places that I really, really feel like I can't miss out on. And if I can get all the others, phenomenal. That's great. But, you know, just realistically, it's better to go and spend more time in one or two places, you know, actually get to know the people, the culture, the region, the food, you know, spend time and really enjoy what you're doing, because traveling is hard and it's exhausting. And if you're going and you're just constantly traveling place to place to place to place, then you're not getting the enjoyment of the place. You're spending most of your time traveling, honestly. And that's one of the things I don't love about those big tour companies that are like, you can hit all of the major cities in Europe for a certain number of whatevers.
Yeah.
Like, it's that kind of a tour is not actually worth it unless you're just going for the picture.
Yeah.
So.
One of my best friends who again is living in Europe at the moment and is just living her best life. We have very different, I've realized, styles of travel and stuff, and that like she always is just naturally been someone who sleeps in all the time and like won't get up, and I'm like, no, if you need to get up to go see what you want to see, you get up at whatever time. And my roommate loves has already said that like for her 30th birthday we're doing a cruise, and like she has been trying to get me on cruise life for a very long time. She's like, cruises are just so great, and I'm just like, and the more I've thought about it, the more I'm like, one, I don't want to be stuck in one place like with people, like with just crowds of people. And then I realize I really only go and travel places for history.
Yeah.
I'm like cruises don't take me anywhere that is like I don't really go for sites like the pretty view, like the Alaskan cruises or something like that. Like I wouldn't go on one like that, because that's not what I'm here for. Like I am there for the history. I'm there to go and learn something. Very, very rarely am I like, I stupidly spent 3 days in Pisa. Pisa is a day that you can do in one day if you're doing like the main tourist things. But I had bought the hostel. I was there for 3 days. I spent the second day writing and just relaxing in my hostel. And then the third day I went to the beach for the day. And that's the first time I've just like gone and done something that was not like touristy based or history based in that way. Because I feel like there is the difference between, we'll say, history tourism and I don't know. We need it like aesthetic tourism, maybe like for the sites.
Aesthetic tourism, absolutely.
Yeah, for the sites, for the pictures, for not really the like sitting down and learning something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My frivolous tourism this year is we're going to see the Phantom of the Opera in Italy, and that is my frivolous.
Italy.
I'm not going specifically for the history. I'm going for Ramin Karimloo.
We love. I've met Ramin Karimloo after. This is why we just need to hop on the Discord and just talk about things, because I'm just discovering all these.
Discord and talk, because I could spend another several hours.
I met him. When did I meet him? Actually, ironically, I met him twice, but I only saw him. I saw him in Les Mis on Broadway, and I met him after the show. And then after I went to go see If Then with Idina Menzel, and then Idina Menzel didn't come out for the signing, we walked across, and I looked at the door to Les Mis, and I said, "Wonder if Ramin Karimloo's in there." And then he walked out the door that moment that I said that, and I said, "Huh!" And then we went and took a photo with him again. But
amazing.
Oh God, that. Him in Italy, in Italy doing Phantom. I would have died. I would have died seeing him in Phantom. That would have been amazing.
But I booked us in for 2.5 days in the city.
There you go.
Because we're not just going to fly in and then leave.
No.
We're going. There's a bunch of Roman ruins there.
Ooh.
My great grandmother's last name was von Trieste.
Ooh.
So apparently there's some family history there.
Are you going?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. I hate to say it. You gotta go. There's a museum there that has mummies, because Trieste was, oh God, you've picked on the, Trieste was the, before it was Italy, before it was included in the Italian border, it was the only, the port for the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Like, because it came down that area. So that is where the majority of mummies during the, like, not mummy trade essentially, but like when people would go to Egypt and they'd purchase something, it would go to Trieste, Italy, and then it would go to America or else somewhere else in Europe. So this mummy that where I'm currently working with my new job at this archaeology museum, when I interned there back in my grad school, there was an article in the local newspaper from 1862 about a mummy being on display in a tavern, and so they asked me to do a research project about it, and I had found out that this mummy came from Trieste, And so I made a map of where it all went because it went on tour on the East Coast of America. Yeah, it was like the Trieste. I was like, wait a second. Yeah, Trieste is super interesting. And I think because of that, there is a small archaeology museum. I don't know if it's an archaeology museum or history museum, but they don't have a website. So you don't really know what's there, but I know that there are apparently some mummies there. So go see that.
Please send me the location.
I will. I think it's on my, actually.
Well, we will absolutely do that. Also, just because I looked in the chat, Anna, yes. If you are worried about meat or food in Ireland and you don't eat beef or pork, you will be fine. We are an island. Plenty of fish. There's plenty of vegetarian options as well. I've got lots of friends over here who are veg or vegan, and they're fine. You will have a wonderful time, and we will make sure that you have the proper amount of food.
I'm pulling up my map because I think I'm trying to remember if I put the links to the actual pages or if I just put the name. Oh, here we go.
Beef dishes are kind of the bigger, more popular ones, but there's plenty of seafood. Don't you fret.
There's the link. It's called the Oh no, Melissa, you kind of Lapidario Tergestino. Yeah, that's it. That's apparently the museum in Trieste.
Amazing.
But yeah, it's amazing. Oh yes, potatoes in Ireland, and also do you guys eat a lot of fish pie up there? I don't know if fish pie was just a weird thing I encountered in England.
I personally don't. I'm not a seafood girl. I am all about the beef and the pork and chicken.
I am also about the beef.
But I have seen plenty of seafood and fish pie on various things.
My dig that was in southern England when I was studying abroad. We were camping for 2 weeks, but they got the local pub guy to come and make us food every night, except for like one night where we did barbecue. And one like we were there for 2 weeks, so Tuesdays was fish pie night, and I was like, what? Because I've never had fish pie, and I like salmon, I like some fish foods, but I live in an area where we eat a lot of crabs, and I was like, what? Surprisingly I enjoyed it. I was very cautious. It's essentially a chicken pot pie, but with multiple kinds of fish. But yeah, it was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was thinking, I was like, fish pie.
Yes. Alex, we are deep in the Midlands. There's not much fish.
Not much fish.
I mean, there is, but we're distinctly in the center. We're not near the coast.
Very center. Oh,
very center.
Amazing. All right. Well, Grace, we will let you go because
thank you.
You need to go to sleep, my love.
I do. It's almost 3 a.m.
Yeah, we need to go to sleep. I need to go to sleep. I gotta wake up in 12 hours to go to a double baptism with potentially 80 or so family members from not my side of the family, we'll say.
That's sweet.
One of my cousin's wife is an only child, but both of her parents are one of 8. So she, at her bridal shower and at their wedding, there were 12 tables of her family and 1 table of my family, including our family friends. This is just the women, of course, but yeah. And I completely didn't think that they were going to come down for the baptism, but of course they are, because my cousin is stationed in Japan, so they're literally back in the country. They had the baby in Japan, baby's here now, so it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, everybody's got to see.
Yeah, it's going to be wild. And also my mom dropped the news via email to my family that I got a new job. So I will be repeating the same thing over and over and over again. Yes.
Yeah.
We have gone in denial to beyond the Nile. We have gone very much beyond the Nile. Thank you.
Very far beyond.
So thank you so much, Grace. I will let you go, and we will definitely, if you have any other ideas you want to present, we would love to hear it, because that was a great, I would love to hear about that Mary Magdalene church, like, forever.
I have so many things. I'll send you my master's thesis if
you
want.
Yes.
Really just that.
That sounds awesome. So thank you so much, Grace. Everyone say thank you to Grace.
Thank you. Bye, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you later.